She thought I was asleep. That's what wrecks me the most. She looked at me, eyes closed, breathing slow, and decided it was safe to speak freely. That's the moment she killed something she couldn't revive. It was 2:04 a.m. I know because I just checked my phone under the blanket, trying not to light up the room. I couldn't sleep. Her back was to me. I remember because her hair was spread across the pillow like ink in water, and I'd always thought it was beautiful. I don't know why I was awake. No nightmares. No noise. Just stillness. Then her phone lit up. Just a glow at first. She didn't check to see if I was awake. She didn't whisper. She didn't hesitate. She answered. I can't talk long. He's right next to me. That's when my heart dropped into my stomach. No, I haven't told him. I won't. What would be the point? He wouldn't fight. He'd just disappear. A pause. My fingers curled into fists under the blanket. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I regret marrying him. I think I always have. But he was kind to me when I needed someone. That's all. It wasn't love. It was timing. She laughed. Quietly. Like the sound of a match burning too fast. No, he has no idea. He's not like you. He doesn't ask questions. He just exists. I stared at the ceiling. I don't remember what came next. Not because I forgot, but because I mentally switched off. Like my brain pressed mute. Her voice became noise. Words without edges. Her body still warm next to mine. My whole life, 3 inches away, dissolving like sugar in water. At 3:12 a.m., I got up. Quietly. No shoes. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't grab my wallet. I just walked out in my t-shirt and boxers, stepped barefoot into the cold garage, and sat in the car. My hands on the wheel, not turning the key. Just sitting. She hadn't even ended the call yet. I think I waited there for hours. Maybe 5. Maybe more. Watching the sky turn from black to the color of guilt. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even shiver. I just sat there, soaking in the sound of everything inside me collapsing. I left without a word. I didn't leave her a note. I didn't slam the door. She'd said I'd just disappear, so I did. I gave her exactly what she thought I would. But that wasn't the end. It wasn't even close. Because when I finally looked through her messages 2 days later, the ones she never thought I'd see, I realized something that made my silence feel like a mistake. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning what came next. I didn't go far that first morning. I drove about 20 minutes to an old grocery store parking lot that hadn't been resurfaced in years. The lines were faded. The streetlights flickered like they had stage fright. I just sat there, engine off, watching the condensation beat on the windshield, like the world was crying on my behalf because I couldn't. At least not yet. By noon, I was back in town, not home, just near it. I parked on a side street by the community library. I knew she wouldn't look for me there. Elise hated that building. She said it smelled like wet carpet and unspoken dreams. That was the kind of thing she said a lot, now that I think about it. Words that sounded poetic until you realized how hollow they really were. I spent 2 nights in the car. Ate trail mix. Showered once at a gas station that charged $4 for lukewarm water and shame. The whole time, I didn't look at my phone. I didn't want to see if she'd noticed I was gone. I didn't want her to prove herself right, that I'd just vanish without a sound. But by the 3rd morning, something changed in me. I didn't want closure. I wanted clarity. I wanted to know what I was to her beyond just a placeholder. Because somewhere between her whispering, I regret marrying him, and me walking out the door, I'd lost the ability to define myself. If I was going to vanish, I needed to at least understand what I was walking away from. So I went back to the house. The neighborhood still smelled like cut grass and barbecued lies. I parked a block away and walked in through the back, using the spare key she never remembered I still had. The house was quiet. Too quiet. No music. No sound of the dishwasher or the coffee pot. I tiptoed across our hardwood floors like a thief in my own life. Her laptop was still open on the dining table. Elise wasn't there. She must have gone to work or to her sisters or wherever wives go when they've already replaced you emotionally and are working on the logistics. I didn't want to snoop, but I also didn't stop myself. I opened the lid. No password. Just her home screen, a wallpaper of a mountain she'd never climbed, with icons scattered like confetti. I clicked one folder called School Stuff, expecting essays or grades. What I found was a subfolder named Other. Inside that, a folder named M. My first initial. I clicked it. Inside were screenshots. Dozens of them. Texts, emails, photos. Some were of me sitting on the couch, sleeping in bed, watering the lawn. Photos she'd clearly taken without me noticing. Others were of a man I didn't recognize, tan, clean-cut, probably in his mid-30s. In every shot, Elise was touching him. A hand on his chest. Fingers brushing his chin. Her eyes lit up in ways I hadn't seen in years. Not since our honeymoon. Maybe not even then. There were messages, too. Long ones. Gushing ones. I can't wait until it's just us. It's getting closer. I promise. He's starting to suspect something. He's too quiet lately. You know how he gets. By next month, we'll have our own place. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him. He won't even read it. He's passive like that. That one gutted me. Because she was right. I'd spent years not pushing, not asking, not confronting. I thought I was being respectful, giving her space, avoiding conflict. But to her, it was weakness. It was silence mistaken for stupidity. But here's the part that really burned. One file, a PDF, was labeled Postnuptial Proposal. I opened it. It was a draft agreement. Something she was planning to present me. Giving her the house, her car, and a large chunk of my savings under the guise of simplifying things. She hadn't just stopped loving me. She had started planning around me. Planning a future where I was nothing but an easy exit. I sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. Not angry. Not even hurt anymore. Just hollow. And in that moment, one terrifying truth crept in. She wasn't done yet. This wasn't the end of the betrayal. It was still unfolding, right under my nose. And the next move? It wasn't hers to make anymore. I couldn't breathe in that house. Not because of the betrayal, that part had gone numb already, but because of the stillness. The furniture looked like it belonged to strangers. The pictures on the wall, smiling versions of us from weddings and birthdays, felt like props in a museum of something extinct. And I realized, standing in the middle of the life I supposedly built, that nothing here was really mine anymore. Not even the air. So I walked out again. Quietly. Like a ghost in my own story. But this time, I didn't go back to a gas station or a parking lot. I drove aimlessly until I found a little cafe I'd never noticed before, the kind of place without a sign out front, just a red door and a flickering open light that looked like it was surviving out of stubbornness. It wasn't far from the highway, tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. The kind of spot you'd only find when your whole world had shrunk to silence and static. I went inside. The place smelled like over-roasted beans and burnt toast. One booth was occupied by a man in a mechanic's uniform flipping through a phone with a cracked screen. The waitress had a limp and offered me black coffee without asking. I nodded. She poured it like she'd been doing it since the Truman administration. And I sat there, with a notebook I found in my glove box. One of Elise's, pale green with the words, "Things to Become," etched on the front. That hit harder than I expected. Because the woman planning to leave me for someone else once wrote down a list of all the things she hoped to grow into. I never read the pages. I figured they were private. But now I didn't care. I opened it. The first page was a quote, "A slow knife cuts the deepest." No author. No explanation. Then a list, neat and methodical. Become fearless. Own a house without compromise. Leave a relationship without guilt. Be in love without hesitation. Be selfish once. Just once. I traced my fingers over those words like they could tell me who she really was. And the truth was, I didn't know. I didn't know my wife. I'd been sleeping beside someone I only understood through context clues and assumptions. The woman who said, "I do," was not the same one who whispered into the phone at 2 a.m. about how forgettable I'd become. But the moment that changed everything wasn't in the notebook. It was what happened next. I was sipping the third refill of lukewarm coffee when someone slid into the booth across from me. No warning. No, "Hey, is this seat taken?" Just the sound of a coat against vinyl and a body settling in like it belonged there. It was him. I didn't recognize him at first. But once I saw the slight scar near his eyebrow, the same one from the photos on Elise's laptop, I knew. It was the man from the pictures. The man who'd been taking what was mine behind my back. He didn't smile. He looked at me the way people look at broken machines, not angry, just inconvenienced. "You Milton?" he asked. I didn't answer. I think I blinked twice. "She said you might try and make this messy. Thought I'd introduce myself. Clear the air. Got a guy. Got a guy." I gripped the mug like it was the only thing tethering me to this plane of existence. She doesn't want to fight, he said, resting his hands flat on the table like he thought I might lunge at him. She just wants out clean. And she deserves that, don't you think? He leaned forward. You had 12 years. That's more than most people get. Just let her go, man. You don't have to understand it. I stared at him. No words. Not one. Because if I'd opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what would come out, a scream, a sob, or worse. He slid a manila envelope across the table. Her lawyer will be in touch. Don't drag it out. You're not that guy. And then, just like that, he stood up and walked out. Like I was a chapter he'd skimmed and decided not to finish. I didn't touch the envelope. Not that day. Instead, I sat there in that nameless cafe, listening to the hum of the refrigerator behind the counter and the soft clink of the spoon in my coffee cup. And something shifted. I wasn't angry. I wasn't jealous. I wasn't even heartbroken anymore. I was done. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. No, if she wanted to cut me out of her future, if he thought I was too soft to push back, then maybe it was time to let them both see just how much damage a quiet man can do without ever raising his voice. I didn't go home after he left the cafe. I waited exactly 13 minutes. I remember because I counted them. 1 minute for every year Elise and I were together, 12 married, 1 engaged. Then I stood up, left the envelope on the table untouched, and walked back to my car. There was no grand plan. No evil genius blueprint. I didn't become someone else overnight. But something new had taken root inside me, something that didn't want to scream or confront or destroy. It wanted to observe. To witness the version of Elise that she never showed me when she thought I was watching. So I didn't go back to that little parking lot outside town or sleep in the front seat like a man who lost everything. Instead, I went back to the house. Our house. My house. Quietly. At night. And I didn't walk through the front door. There's an old crawl space under the house, barely 4 feet high. I'd fixed a leak down there once, years ago, and remembered how you could hear everything through the floorboards. So I climbed in, flashlight in hand, and waited. The space was cold, damp, smelled like mildew and secrets. I stayed hidden for hours. That night, she came home late. I heard her heels first, that sharp, clipped rhythm that always reminded me of someone announcing their presence. Then her voice. Not the one she used around me. This one was lighter, sweeter. I could picture her smile through the boards above. She wasn't alone. I think he's still sulking somewhere, she said. I don't know. Probably at his sister's. He's not confrontational. He'll just sign whatever's put in front of him. He always does. Another voice. His. Deeper. Kakia. You sure you're not pushing too fast? A pause. A laugh. No. He's like wallpaper. You stop noticing it after a while. That was the first time I clenched my fists so tight my fingernails broke skin. But I didn't move. Not yet. Because something about hearing them talk that casually in my home shifted everything I thought I knew about endings. They weren't waiting for permission. They were already celebrating. And that's when I made my decision. I was going to stay. Not forever. Not dramatically. Not in a blaze of vengeance. But long enough. Long enough to see it all. Long enough to understand the story Elise thought she was writing, and maybe add a footnote or two of my own. So for the next 2 days, I lived in the walls. Literally. I'd built enough of this house with my own hands to know its soft spots, attic panels, forgotten vents, that loose board behind the linen closet that opens into the insulation space. I became a shadow, a phantom in my own life. Watching, listening, learning. And what I learned ruined every memory I had. She laughed at our wedding photos. Called the vows performance art. Told him she never liked how I kissed. That she had to reset her body clock every time we touched, just to fake wanting it. She wasn't just over me. She had replaced me in her mind, in her plans, in her body. And the new version of her life didn't include room for regret. But here's what she didn't know. I wasn't signing anything. Not the postnup. Not the quiet exit. Not the reality she scripted where I just slid out of her life without friction. Because while I'd been hiding, I'd also been collecting. I had photos now. Audio recordings. Documents from her laptop saved to my cloud. Bank transfers to a private account in her name. Emails from her to her lawyer with draft versions of how to convince Milton it was his idea. But I wasn't planning to use any of it in court. No. What I had planned was quieter. More permanent. Because Elise wanted to erase me cleanly. She wanted the break to feel like relief. So I would make her feel the opposite. I would become the absence she couldn't explain. The silence that followed her into every room. The what if she never saw coming. And I knew exactly when to start. The anniversary was in 4 days. And she had plans. Plans that didn't include me. Yet, Elise had planned a weekend getaway. I found the itinerary inside her top drawer, wedged between a bottle of lavender lotion and a pack of birth control pills that had my name written all over them, as in, the lack of my name. 2 nights, upscale lodge by the lake, dinner reservation for 2 under the name, Rochelle. She used a pseudonym. That part made me pause. Not because she was being careful, but because she was being experienced. This wasn't her first affair. This was just the first one she didn't bother to bury. She packed Thursday night. I watched her from the vent above our bedroom closet. She took her time, choosing lingerie I'd never seen, dresses I knew weren't bought with her school salary. She danced to a playlist I didn't recognize, smiling at her reflection like the woman she was playing had finally come home. By the time she zipped up her bag, I had already made my move. Not a grand move. Not something to catch the house on fire or trigger police reports. I started with something small. I moved the toothbrush holder 1 inch to the left. I replaced the cap on her serum with a different one from my drawer. I swapped out the batteries in the kitchen clock, so it would die sometime the next morning, confusing her sense of time just enough to make her hesitate. Just enough to get in her head. Then, I opened her nightstand drawer and slipped in the photo. It was us. Our honeymoon, Sedona, red rocks and smiles. But I'd circled my face in red marker. No message. No context. Just a circle. When she saw it, I wanted her to ask herself one thing. Is he back? She left the house Friday morning at 7:14 a.m., humming a tune from her teenage years and texting someone whose name she'd saved as Carla. The moment her car disappeared down the road, I stepped out of hiding and took my first deep breath in 4 days. I made a pot of coffee, opened the curtains, and sat in our living room like I belonged there, because I did. More than she did now. And I waited. By noon, the text started. The first one was casual. Elise, did you move something in the bathroom? Then an hour later. Elise, weird. Did you take one of the honeymoon pictures out of the frame? I could have sworn it was in the guest room. I didn't reply. She didn't know where I was. That was the point. Silence was power. At 6:03 p.m., she called me. Not to apologize, not to confess. Just to check. Hey, just wondering if you came by the house. I thought maybe you left something and forgot to tell me. No big deal, just let me know, okay. I let it ring. Then I powered the phone off completely. Because I wasn't interested in scaring her. I was interested in showing her exactly what happens when you try to erase a man who was always there. The kind of man who sees everything, remembers everything, and never shouts. Just watches. That night, she texted again. Elise, Milton, this isn't funny. No one was laughing. I stayed in the house all weekend. Wore her favorite robe. Slept on her side of the bed. Rearranged the books in the office so that every title started with a letter from my name. Just subtle things. Things you might not notice until they became a pattern. Until they started whispering in your head. By Sunday, she was unraveling. I know because she came home early. I was upstairs when I heard the garage open. She wasn't supposed to be back until late that night, but the storm outside must have made the lakeside cabin feel less romantic. I slipped back into the attic space, listening through the vent as she slammed the door, her heels hitting the tile like gunshots. She started talking to herself. I could hear it. Pacing. Cursing. You're imagining things. You're imagining things. But she wasn't. She walked into the bedroom and screamed when she saw the Polaroid taped to her pillow. It was another photo of me. Not recent. Old. Grainy. From our first apartment. I was holding a birthday cake, smiling like I believed in something. No message. Just the image. Just my face. That night, she didn't sleep. I know because neither did I. She walked the halls like she was waiting for something to jump out. Locked the bedroom door. Turned on the hallway lights and left them burning until morning. She didn't call me. She didn't call anyone. She was too afraid of what she'd have to say, or too unsure I was even still human. On Monday, she finally broke. She called my sister. Left a message I heard later on speakerphone. Can you please tell Milton to call me? I think he came by the house. I think he's... I don't know. I just need to know if he's okay. Please. Okay. That's what she wanted to know now. She never asked if I was happy. Never asked what I needed. But now, when her world started to tilt just a little, suddenly my well-being mattered. It wasn't guilt. It was fear. And fear is a powerful thing. But I hadn't even touched the truth yet. The real truth, the one she buried, wasn't in her texts or photos or whispers over the phone. It was in something I'd almost missed. A single document, hidden behind an innocent file labeled PTA minutes. And once I opened it, I realized. She didn't just betray me emotionally. She committed a crime. The file was named PTA minutes, so harmless it almost slipped past me. Nestled between lesson plans and expense reports, it had sat there unnoticed, untouched, like a spider web in an attic corner. But I opened it out of habit, thinking maybe I'd find another scrap of text, a passing joke about me, one more confirmation of how irrelevant I'd become. What I found instead was a 4-page document formatted like a contract. No school logos. No official headers. Just a series of numbered clauses and a blank space at the bottom for signatures. My name was printed there. Only, I had never seen this document before in my life. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. The language was slippery, vague legal phrasing, veiled in terms like temporary guardianship, transitional power of attorney, asset transfer via acknowledgement. It was like looking through dirty glass. You could see shapes, but nothing sharp enough to be sure what you were seeing. But then I read a phrase that made my throat go dry. Subject hereby forfeits claim to primary residence, vehicle, and joint accounts in exchange for deferred compensation to be negotiated post-dissolution. Deferred. Negotiated. Post-dissolution. In other words, I was being tricked into walking away from everything with no guarantees, no rights, no say. And worse, my signature was already on it. Sloppily forged, but close enough. Someone who'd seen me sign birthday cards, tax returns, anniversary notes. Elise had practiced. She hadn't just lied. She'd planned. I wasn't a person to her anymore. I was a technicality to clean up. A name to erase from a title deed. I sat in the attic holding my breath as something in me finally cracked. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud. And not the kind you walk away from. I backed up the document onto a flash drive I carried on my keychain, then uploaded a copy to a cloud drive under a name no one would suspect. My mother's maiden name combined with the year Elise and I first met. It was so specific it felt poetic. Something ugly wrapped in something sweet. Just like her. Then I made a call. Not to a lawyer. Not yet. To someone else. Someone I hadn't spoken to in 9 years. His name was Benton Wild. My old college roommate. Back then, we were inseparable, the quiet nerd and the loud skeptic. He dropped out senior year and fell off the map. Last I heard he was doing cybersecurity work somewhere deep in the Rust Belt, living off black coffee and cold secrets. He picked up on the third ring. Milton, he said, his voice like static wrapped in gravel. Well, *T. You alive? I didn't explain much. Just told him I needed a favor. Something discreet. Something encrypted. Benton didn't ask questions. Just said, send me everything. I'll call you tomorrow. And just like that, I had a witness. But Elise? She was cracking. I could feel it. She began coming home early, leaving her phone in her purse when she walked around, checking windows, locking doors twice. I watched her through the crawlspace vent as she stood in the middle of the kitchen at midnight, whispering to herself, "You're overthinking. You're overthinking. He's not here." But I was. And every small move I made, switching her contacts around, setting her radio to stations that played our songs, leaving the hallway light slightly dimmer than usual, pushed her a little further into the quiet spiral. Then came the voicemail. I listened from the attic. She called someone named Mara, another friend she hadn't mentioned in years. I think I'm being followed. I know how it sounds. But I keep hearing things. The garage light was on yesterday morning, and I didn't touch it. My coffee machine was full this morning. I haven't used it in weeks. Do you think Milton's watching me? Mara's response was muffled. Elise snapped. I know it sounds crazy, but you don't know him. You don't know what silence does to a man like him. It grows teeth. That line. That's when I smiled. Because she wasn't wrong. My silence had teeth now. And I had one last thing to do before stepping out of the shadows. One thing Elise could never undo. No matter what she signed, no matter who she kissed, no matter how many candles she lit at a lake house. I had to talk to the one person Elise hadn't accounted for. The man in her photos. The man she thought she could replace me with. The one who didn't realize the house he walked into was already set to collapse. And I knew exactly how to reach him, because he had unknowingly left me the perfect opening. A single, careless message on her laptop. A calendar invite. Dinner reservation for 2. Tuesday, 7:30 p.m. His name was listed this time. No aliases. No coin nicknames. Just Brandon Levitt. And I was going to be there before he ever picked up his fork. Tuesday arrived like the kind of storm that doesn't hit all at once. It crawled in slowly, gray and humid, pressing against your skin like a second layer. I watched the weather because I knew it would affect everything. Elise's mood, Brandon's timing, the restaurant's noise level. I didn't want chaos. I wanted focus. And when you've been silent long enough, you start to hear how people breathe when they're lying. Brandon had made the reservation under his own name. Levitt, party of 2, 7:30. Upscale place. The kind of polished wood and warm lighting that tries to convince you you're worth more than you are. The menu had no prices. The valet wore gloves. The kind of restaurant Elise always said was too much, but secretly adored when someone else was paying. I arrived at 6:52 p.m. I didn't walk in the front. I waited across the street, parked behind a florist van with a view straight through the glass wall into the dining room. Brandon was already there by 7:12, early, eager, probably rehearsing his lines in his head. He wore a pale blue shirt, no tie, sleeves rolled, watch visible. His version of casual confidence. I let him wait. At 7:41, Elise still hadn't arrived. I knew she wouldn't. That part one had planned, too. Because earlier that day, while she was in a faculty meeting she'd foolishly left open on her Google Calendar, I disabled her car. Just enough. Not damage. Not destruction. Just a loose spark plug and a disconnected relay. She'd turn the key and get nothing. She'd panic. She'd call Brandon. And I'd be there to pick up instead. Which is exactly what happened at 7:45. His phone rang. I watched him answer, his posture tensing. He stepped out of the booth and into the hallway. I moved fast. Inside the restaurant, I didn't go to the host stand. I walked straight to table 9, his table, and sat in the chair across from where he'd been sitting. I didn't touch anything. Didn't speak to anyone. I just waited, my palms resting flat against the linen tablecloth, my breath steady. When he returned, phone in hand, he froze. Like he'd walked into the wrong dream. I looked at him. Didn't smile. Didn't blink. Just let him sit back down and process. He cleared his throat. Milton. Brandon. Long pause. Where's Elise? He asked, barely hiding the discomfort in his voice. She's at home, I said. Or close to it. Her car didn't start. I imagine she'll be wondering why you didn't answer when she calls back. He glanced at his phone, then at me, calculating. I'm not here to fight, I continued. You can relax. He didn't relax. He shifted his jaw. He wanted this to be over, but I wasn't rushing. You've known her how long? I asked. He hesitated. Almost a year. I nodded. Interesting. She says it was 3 months. So, one of you is lying. Or both. I don't think this is productive, he muttered, already reaching for his jacket. I spoke before he could stand. Quiet, but sharp enough to freeze him mid-motion. You forged my signature on legal documents. He stopped. You might think that's her idea. And maybe it was. But you participated. Which means you're tied to it. Every transfer. Every message. Every photo you sent. I have them all. He stared at me, color draining slowly from his face. I don't want money, I said. I don't want Elise back. I don't want to ruin your life. I just want you to understand something. He didn't respond. I leaned forward, voice low. She told you I was weak. Passive. Just a signature waiting to be collected. Pause. She was wrong. I slid a single envelope across the table. Same kind of envelope he once gave me in a cafe. Only this one wasn't filled with vague threats and paperwork. It was empty. He opened it. Looked inside. Furrowed his brow. What is this? It's the space I left for your future. He looked up. I'm not going to court. Not going to the press. But if you or Elise make one more move toward that account, that house, or my name, I'll fill that envelope with everything I have. And you'll never work in finance again. Not even as a teller. He didn't speak. Didn't blink. Didn't touch his drink. I stood up. You thought I'd scream, I said softly. You thought I'd beg. But some men don't break loud. Some men just stop being useful to your story. And those are the ones you should worry about. I walked away. Didn't look back. And the best part? Elise was still calling him when I passed his car. I watched his phone buzz under the windshield. He didn't pick up. He had too much to think about now. And I wasn't finished. There was still one last thing I needed to do. Not for closure. Not for revenge. But because Elise had one more secret, and I hadn't decided yet whether to bury it or hand it back to her with the lid half open, I didn't return to the house right away. After that dinner with Brandon, I drove for hours, not to escape, but to breathe air that didn't know our names. I stopped at a cliffside overlook I used to visit during my early 20s. Back then, I'd sit for hours, scribbling poems and letters I'd never sent, believing that silence meant failure. Now I understood something different. Silence, when chosen, is control. It's not weakness, it's restraint. I stayed there until the sky began bleeding color over the horizon. Then I made one final stop before going home, a notary's office in a town Elise and I had only passed through once. I signed the papers. Not the ones she gave me. Those were already turned over to my attorney, along with a full packet of evidence documenting the forgery. That process was now in the hands of professionals, quietly handled, no drama. But the documents I signed that day were mine. They had nothing to do with Elise. They were the start of a new address, a change of name on a bank account, a withdrawal from a joint fund into a clean, personal one, legal, undisputed, and properly timed. I wasn't stealing. I was preserving what she would have erased. My future. When I walked through the front door that night, Elise was in the kitchen, surrounded by half-packed boxes and legal pads full of crossed-out plans. She froze when she saw me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply looked at her calmly, finally, fully, and said, "It's done. You don't have to pretend anymore." She stared at me like I was a stranger in my own skin. "I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. But I just nodded. Not because I believed her, but because I no longer needed the truth from her mouth. I already had it in the files, the texts, the choices. And most of all, I had it in who I had become. "I've already left," I said. "This is just the part where I take my body with me. No fight. No begging. No theatrics." She asked me, "Where will you go?" And I smiled, because for the first time in over a decade, I had no answer. And it felt good. That was 4 months ago. Now I live by the coast. I write. Nothing professional, mostly journals and reflections, sometimes fiction that bleeds a little too close to real life. I ride my bike at sunrise, drink real coffee again, and volunteer on Saturdays at a marine rescue center where no one knows me as anyone's husband. I got a postcard last week from Elise. No return address. No explanation. It just said, "You were never the quiet one." I was. You just finally stopped listening. I didn't reply. Not because I hate her. Because I've forgiven her. Not for her, for me. And in that silence, I found something she'll never be able to touch. Peace.